earlier this week, the MSD released their child poverty report, and I'm imagining it's not great news. Joining us on the program now to give some analysis to it is Senior Social Policy Analyst for the Salvation Army Social Policy Unit, Paul Barber. Paul, kia ora, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, kia ora, Andrew. Good to be here.
Now, to be fair, some of the data in this report goes back a wee way. It's not a recent snapshot by any means.
Yeah, the child poverty report that the Ministry of Social Development produces, its author Brian Perry has been doing this work for decades, and is a bit of an authority on this. It's one of those sources that people like myself, I guess, who are working in this area really go, because it does attempt to dive more deeply into the data and the information and draw on longer term trends. Mm-hmm. But the actual numbers, the statistics he's working from are the same ones that were around child poverty that were released in February 24, relating to the year ending June 2023. There we go. So no new update on poverty, but some more analysis. And yeah, I guess there's quite a lot in it. I'm still working through it myself. I just got it yesterday afternoon. So, but one of the things that I've been really concerned about, and why I wanted to mention this today, is just this impact of housing costs on those on the lowest incomes. So when people, more than half of the children who live in material hardship, so there's about 144,000 in those figures who are living in material hardship, going without things, living in poor quality housing. It's not being able to get to the doctor, inadequate clothing, poorly heated, damp houses. Those children live in private rental households. So this is why it's really important that we get our private rental rules right, that we have good quality and affordable private rental housing, because that's where most of the children in poverty live. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to solve their poverty problem by saying we have to build thousands of new houses over some distant future period. Yeah. We're going to have to deal with their poverty now. And for me, the urgency is about how we do that.
Now, although the statistics go back a season or two, we can, I suppose, extrapolate that one thing we know about the children from this report is for all of them almost, pretty much we can guarantee that the rent has gone up in the places that they live since this data was gathered, and the legislation has changed not in their favour when it comes to security of accommodation.
Yes, we're in a situation now where the security of tenure for people is being reduced. That means it's easier for people to be end up homeless, because often if your tenancy's ended and you're on a low income, you're going to really struggle to find another property that you can afford. And I guess the other aspect of that is we're slowed down, where there's a lot of uncertainty around the pipeline of social housing. Yep. You see in these child poverty figures that having families living in social housing where their rent is capped at an affordable percentage of their income, they're much less likely to be in poverty. And so we're at a turning point where things are going the wrong direction. The numbers were from June 2023. We'll find out the numbers for June this year in February next year. But the trend has been, unfortunately, for the poverty and hardship figures to be, after a few years, 5 years or so of figures improving. Yeah. Last year they got worse. And this year, I'm afraid we can probably expect that there'll be further worsening because it's simply, as you say, housing costs, incomes, loss of employment and such things. And it's not a very hopeful message to be sharing today, but it's a reality check. Yep. And it's a reminder to us when decisions are being made now, they have impacts that we're going to be seeing in coming years. And we need to be alert to the needs and be responsive and recognize that things need to be done now that actually deliver help, and don't say, sometime, somewhere in the future, it might get better.
I mean, it is a long-term solution, but action needs to be taken today in order to see the benefits of that long term. I think it's similar to the other topic we're going to be talking about today, is a new policy called Beneficiaries First, which I'm not sure if this is an intentionally ironic title. However, the government's big audacious goal to reduce the amount of people on job seeker benefits by 50,000. Again, this seems to be a big goal, but tracking the wrong direction at the moment, Paul.
Yes, we have been asking since from this government since they came into power to explain to us what their plan is to be able to actually take people from the job seeker benefit into paid employment and not make them disappear, make them ineligible or whatever. And what has happened since November when the new government came in is that the number of people on the job seeker benefit has risen by 20,000. So the numbers are going against them right now, and we're economically in a recession that may last quite a while.
Yeah.
So this week we saw an announcement from the minister with, you say, the somewhat unusual title of beneficiaries first, but what that announcement is addressing that question that we've been asking. So what is your plan to get people into actual jobs? And the current government's plan is a reallocation of the existing money they spend on supporting people into employment. That's $1.1 billion in actual fact. Reallocating some of that away from people who are not on benefits to people who are on benefit, on a job seeker benefit. Now that is a perfectly legitimate thing to do, but you've got to realize that's another example of reprioritizing spending. It's the amount that's being spent is less than what's been spent last year. It's being reallocated. And that means it's being taken away. Let's say it's taken away from people on the margins of the job market who might not have been, might not be officially a job seeker, but they may be underemployed. And these schemes like Mana and Mahi and Flexi Wage, which are various types of subsidies to employers to take people who are on the job seeker benefit and support them with training and employment. So it's definitely addressing that issue, but it's not putting any additional resource into. And you've got to ask yourself, how many people will that help, or will that simply displace one group of people with another?
Yeah. Now, of course, the easiest way to bring down the government's budget in this area is for there to be less people on the job seeker benefit. So there's a direct benefit to the government in being successful in that regard, although you've got to ask the question, okay, you've got a strategy on how you're going to do this, but are there the jobs out there? You mentioned beforehand that, I suppose from the economic point of view, this is to an extent an intentional situation in order to bring down inflation and interest rates, etc. This is a tougher job market than it was even 6 months ago. You can have all the strategies you like, but if there aren't the jobs out there, how can people get off the benefits?
Yes, well, that's one thing that a government can do, is support the creation of additional employment. And this is where I feel it's a challenge in a difficult economic times to do that. But if you come up with strategies to work with employers to say, well, these are important areas of employment. We don't want to see job losses. We want to see actually increases in employment. We want to work with you. And part of that strategy would involve a commitment, I guess, to take people off who are on the margins of the employment market, including on the job seeker benefit, support them with training and employment. So that's what you call in economics a counter-cyclical intervention, where the government recognises now's the time to not to take away support, but actually to add to it. And we would have I've been saying really that for months we've been in that position where enough has been done on the reducing inflation front, and probably the cuts are going too deep now. The pain will be too hard, and I guess you only have to look to the recent announcement about of paper mills closing in North Island here to see that it's getting to a very painful point. And that's why at the moment the plan doesn't look like it's going to have enough impact. But I'm welcoming at least a step by this government to address that question. How do you get people into paid employment if you want to reduce the job seeker?
You're going from a big audacious goal to actually a strategy to move in the direction of that goal, which, I mean, hey, maybe incremental process, but we will see how this goes, I suppose, and whether or not the government can, well, at the very least, reduce the increase in people seeking jobs at the moment. You mentioned, some of these big industries that are shutting their doors, laying off hundreds of people in small town New Zealand. Certainly, it seems to be going the wrong direction, but, optimistic that the government can turn this around, Paul?
I don't know if I can be optimistic at the moment, but we have to remain hopeful that there is a recognition in those in our leadership in our country that they hear what is happening for people. We're certainly telling this government what's going on in the communities where we're working, and the news is not good. We're decisions around support for people who are on the margin, who are struggling with homelessness, particularly difficult right now, and there's a lot more that could be said with that at another time, perhaps. But right now, we're really feeling the pressure is really on communities, and that means it's a time to take a deep breath and say, okay, we have these certain goals. Are we going to get there, or are we making things worse than what we're doing now?
Yeah. Hey, certainly appreciate the work that you do in terms of policy analysis and critique. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Well, thank you, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.